I call the member for Morenni.
Thank you, Speaker. Next year it will be 160 years since the first ship carrying South Sea Islanders arrived in Queensland.
Member, we'll get you to move the motion again, please.
Sorry, I move the motion in my name.
Is that sufficient? Yep, that's fine.
Thank you. Sorry. Next year will be 160 years since the first ship carrying the South Sea Islanders arrived in Queensland. Between 1863 and 1904, more than 50,000 islanders were brought to toil in the fields of Queensland for white farmers. Many were cruelly exploited, chained, beaten, starved and whipped, and in the 1870s, Reverend J.C. Kirby described seeing a group of chained islanders walking through Dalby without shoes, accompanied by armed men on horseback, and said it was like a scene straight out of Uncle Tom's Cabin. I grew up hearing the stories about my Kanaka ancestors, the backbreaking work they did and the suffering they went through. The South Sea Islanders had the highest death rate of any other immigrant group to Australia, an astonishing 30%. The deaths at the government-run Kanakas hospitals in the 1880s were even higher, although the exact numbers may never be known. Islanders were terrified of hospitals, saying they would rather die than go there. Historian Paul Turnbull recently revealed that at least one of them, Mackay Hospital superintendent, was engaged in scientific trade of South Sea Islander remains and body parts. Over 200 autopsies were done between 1884 and 1885. Dr Charles Clarkson provided skulls and full skeletons to the Queensland Museum and possibly other institutions worldwide. This revelation has caused a great deal of shock and distress amongst the community. Sadly, the crimes against South Sea Islanders didn't end with the 19th century. One of the first acts passed on the Federation led to the forced mass deportation of islanders from Australia. The harrowing event has been described by historians as a crime worse than blackbirding itself. There were many horror stories from that time. For me, the worst accounts of boats leaving islanders on the reef at low tide to perish rather than incur the expense of the long journey back to the islands. Speaker, Queensland has more than 40 pieces of racist legislation on South Sea Islanders in its statute books. These include restrictions on employment, voting, land ownership and pearl fishing. Another injustice involves our ancestors' stolen wages. The Pacific Islander Fund held all the wages owed to deceased islanders. It was meant to be held in trust and paid to the men's families on their deaths. Only 15% of those wages were ever paid out to their families. The rest was misappropriated by the Queensland Government and used to pay office expenses and later the cost of deportation. A report submitted to the Parliament in 1905 gave the final balance of the fund's accounts as £39,363, an amount equivalent to about $40 million today, but they are much higher in some other places that we found. No apology or restitution has ever been made to the community for these stolen wages. A 1992 report describes South Sea Islanders as a black minority living on the fringes of white society that suffers persistent and pervasive poverty on par with Aboriginal people and the tribal people. On the 7th of September 2000, the Queensland Government recognised South Sea Islanders and committed to ensuring that the present and the future generations of Australian South Sea Islanders have equality of opportunity to participate in and contribute to the economic, social, political and cultural life of the state. The government also said it would require its departments and other agencies to act on this commitment through their policies, programs and their services. I think it's fair to say that none of these promises have been fulfilled up until just recently with a bit of money that they've given across, and some of that was a government department job as well. Last year I oversaw the drafting of private members' bill which I tried to introduce a program of special measures to assist the South Sea Islanders. I wrote seeking the Premier's support in obtaining the Governor's note so that the bill could be tabled in Parliament. The response I got back from the Health Minister, the Leader of the House, was short and to the point. Due to the current physical climate, the Minister said it would not be appropriate for the Government to support a Governor's message for your proposed private members' bill. A bitterly disappointing response, not just for me, but for the other South Sea Islanders who helped draft the bill, Mr Speaker. South Sea Islanders remain one of the most severely disadvantaged and neglected communities. We are not just another migrant group. The Kanaka story has been one of long history and cruelty and injustice in Queensland. Real action is needed to bring this dark chapter into the state's history to a close. And this motion calls for the undertakings made in the Queensland Recognition Statement 22 years ago to be honoured, and it should be honoured as quick as possible. The second thing is I really find offensive is that our people have to go and trade in their own identity to access anything in the community, and that's unfair to them. because it's actually administrative ethnicised. Out of all the books in the government paperwork, everything that they do, they have to go and trade their name in as someone else to access any sort of funding. Old men dying 2 years ago, 97 years old, ex-service person, died on a dirt floor in Ayr, one of the richest towns in the whole of Queensland. It's a shame.
Deputy Speaker.